Good day, everyone. In this video, we will review interim financial reporting. Okay, so the standard that we will use or that is in effect for interim financial reporting is PAS 34. So our learning objective for this video review is to define an interim financial report, state the scope and applicability of PAS 34, and briefly describe the recognition and measurement principles applied in interim financial reporting. Okay, so definition of terms. When you say interim reporting, it pertains to the preparation and presentation of interim financial reports for an interim period. So, ang daming terms na interim. Pero ano ba tong interim period? So, interim period is a financial reporting period shorter than a full financial year. Okay, so when the financial year is basically that's 1 year. So if you are going to prepare reports for a period shorter than 1 year, then that is interim period. Okay? Ayan. So for example, 3 months, ayan, or 6 months na report, ayan. Okay, so usually that's 3 months. But there are businesses that are encouraged by the standard to prepare interim financial reports for every 6 months or semi-annually. Now, interim financial report means a financial report pertaining either a complete set of financial statements or a set of condensed financial statement. So the complete set of financial statements is in PAS 1. So uh, hindi naman bawal no na mag-prepare ka ng complete set of financial statement kapag nag-prepare ka ng interim reports, no? Or mostly because when we prepare interim reports, it is mostly of estimate, great deal of estimate. So we will just prepare yung mga condensed financial statements under PAS 34. Okay, so the scope of the standard does not require entities to provide interim financial reports. Okay, but it applies if an entity is required by government, no? If it is required by the government or securities regulators, or by the PSE stock exchanges and accountancy bodies, or if the entity uh, elects or chooses to publish an interim financial report in accordance with IFRS. So sabi ng standard, hindi niya nire-require to prepare interim financial report. Okay? But there are instances wherein entities are required to prepare interim financial reports kasi nga required siya ng government or ni securities regulators or ng stock exchange and all other authoritative bodies. Or kung gusto lang talaga niya mag-prepare ng interim financial report. Okay? So pwede. Now, but PAS 34 encourages publicly traded entities, so meaning yung securities nila ay traded in the public or the stock exchange, no? So the standard encourages them to provide at least semi-annual interim financial report and publish them not later than 60 days after the end of the interim period. Ayan. So every 6 months, no? Gina-encourage but hindi required. Okay, gina-encourage ng standard na yung mga publicly traded entities mag-prepare ng interim reports at least 6 months. Ayan. Okay, so in preparing interim financial reports, there are two school of thoughts. No? Parang may dalawang views. The first one is integral view. So according to the integral view, annual operating expenses are estimated and then allocated to the interim periods based on forecasted revenue or sales volume. So basically, there is what? Under integral view, there is allocation of annual operating expenses. Meaning, ina-allocate niya over the interim period. If you're reporting every quarter, every 3 months, or every 6 months, then you have to allocate those expenses every 3 months or every 6 months. Okay, as you prepare your interim reports. While costs incurred, which clearly benefit the entire year, are allocated to the interim periods benefited. Okay? Ayan. And the results of the subsequent interim period must be adjusted to reflect prior estimation error. So basically, itong integral view, it views each interim period as a part of the whole. Meaning, it views each interim period as, as an important aspect of the entire or of the annual financial reports. Okay, so that is according to, the integral view. While the second view naman is the independent view. So in this view, no estimation of allocate or allocation are made for interim purposes unless such estimation or allocation are allowed for annual reporting. So there is no estimation or allocation of expenses and gains, no, over the interim periods. So, annual operating expenses are recognized in the interim period in which they are incurred. So, lahat daw ng expenses, kung kailan daw sila na-incurred na interim period, doon daw lang, uh, it shall only be in that period lang natin sila i-recognize. Okay? So meaning if meron kang insurance expense na na-incur in the second quarter kahit na it benefited the entire year, sa second quarter lang yun na expense na yun, hindi na siya dapat i-allocate. Under this view, of course. So unless uh, deferral or accrual would be allowed in the annual financial statement. So basically, itong independent view naman, it views the interim periods as independent sa annual na mga reports. So meaning if your interim period is every 3 months, no? You're preparing every quarter, every 3 months, then under the independent view, every report, no, every quarterly interim report is independent sa annual na report. Okay? Pero ano yung ginagamit natin? Okay, ano yung sabi ng standard? Well, hindi naman nagsabi ng standard or wala namang sinabi si standard na okay, dapat mag-integral view tayo o dapat mag-independent view. Okay? Essentially, the standard adopts a mix. Okay, so mix of the integral and independent view as dictated by the nature of the cost or revenue being reported on interim purposes. So mix. So depende kung ano talaga yung ano yung effect or ano yung impact ng gains and expenses or income and expenses to the entire year, only such time that we need to judge as to whether dapat ba natin siyang i-allocate over the years or dapat lang natin siyang i-recognize in the interim period in which those gains and expenses are, uh, realized or incurred. Okay? So, again, mixed yung inadapt ng standard. Mixed of an integral and an independent view. Okay, so what are the contents of an interim financial report? So, an entity presenting an interim financial report has the option of complying either PAS1, which is to prepare the complete set of financial statement, or pwede din niyang gamitin si PAS34, no? To prepare condensed set of FS. But usually, pag nag-prepare gani ng interim financial report, usually yung na-prepare lang doon is condensed set of FS. Kasi mahirap mag-prepare ng complete set of financial statements when you prepare interim, financial reports. So yung ginagamit dyan for convenience, of course, to avoid the very costly na pag-identify or uh, acquire ng mga necessary information para lang maka-prepare ng complete set of FS in interim periods. So yung ginamit is yung pinipresent na mga information is yung mga condensed set of financial statements. Okay? Which is of course governed by PAS 34. Now, when you talk about complete set of financial statements, now if the entity reporting preparing interim financial reports and who wishes to prepare complete set of financial statement on those interim periods, then ito yung i-prepare niyo, no? Statement of financial position, statement of profit or loss, and other comprehensive income. statement of changes in equity, statement of cash flows, notes comprising a summary of significant accounting policies and other explanatory information. Okay? Ayan. So, comparative information in respect of the preceding period as well. And a statement of financial position as at the beginning of the preceding period. So, in cases of retrospective application, no, or retrospective restatement or reclassification adjustment. So, ito, no, kung uh, gusto ni entity na mag-prepare ng interim financial report, and then mag-present ng financial statement in a complete set of financial statement, ito dapat yung i-prepare niya. Okay? Pero if this is very costly and this is, impracticable, pwede din naman mag-prepare lang siya ng condensed set of financial statements which is under PAS 34. Okay? So ito, a condensed statement of financial position, okay? Condensed statement of profit or loss, okay, and other comprehensive income presented as either a condensed single statement or a condensed separate income statement and a condensed statement of comprehensive income. Okay, condensed statement of changes in equity and cash flows and selected explanatory notes lang. Okay, hindi na niya necessary to, prepare the explanatory notes, okay, when we prepare the notes to financial statement on an annual basis. Okay, in an interim basis, pwede lang na mag-select siya ng mga explanatory notes. Ayan. Now, ano ba kasi itong condensed? So the term condensed means that an entity needs only to provide the minimum information required under PAS 34. So meaning, hindi siya masyadong detail. Sa complete set of financial statement kasi, masyadong detail yun. Pero kapag condensed set of financial statement yung i-prepare mo under PAS 34, you only need to present the minimum information required, okay, under PAS 34. However, an entity is not prohibited from publishing a complete set of financial statements in accordance with PAS in its interim financial reports. So, as what I have mentioned earlier, pwede din, no? Na kahit na nag-present sa in an interim period ng kanyang financial reports, pwede din na i-present niya using the provisions of PAS 1, complete set of financial statement. Pwede din na PAS 34 yung gamitin niya. Present condensed set of financial statement. Furthermore, an entity is also not prohibited from including in its condensed interim financial statements information that is more than the minimum items or selected explanatory notes set out under PAS 34. So minimum nga lang yung required kapag gusto ka mag-prepare ng condensed set in an interim period. Minimum. So meaning, pwede siya more than minimum. Okay? So pwede ka mag-present ng mga pwede siya mag-present ng mga information not required by PAS 34. Okay? Ayan. Okay, so we have here additional concepts. Relevance over reliability. So in the interest of timeliness and cost consideration, less information may be provided at interim dates. So the more yung pinipresent during interim period is yung more relevant, no? Rather than reliable. Kasi nga we are doing mostly we're doing estimate kasi no kapag nag-prepare ta ng condensed set of financial statements in an interim period. Okay? Now, materiality and estimates. An entity may rely on estimate to a greater extent when preparing interim financial reports. So, dapat tandaan natin to. That when preparing interim financial report, since hindi pa naman available yung lahat ng information in an annual basis, so there is a great deal of reliance on estimate, okay, for the items and amounts that will be presented in the interim financial reports. Now, with regards to the note disclosures, only selected explanatory notes are provided in interim financial reports to avoid repetition. Okay, now, periods for which interim financial statements are presented. So when you prepare financial statements in an interim period, and the interim report is on a semi-annual interim financial reporting, meaning every 6 months. So the statement of financial position or the balance sheet shall be presented as follows. So you will present the current and the comparative. So for the current statement, of financial position, let's say semi-annual, let's say for the interim period ending June 30, 20x1. So sa comparative statement mo, you need to prepare the statement financial position as of the end of the preceding year. So if this is 20x1, yung current year, June 30 yung presentation natin, 6 months ending June 30, 20x1. So dapat sa comparative statement natin, i-present natin yung uh, statement of financial position as of the end of the preceding year. So meaning December 31 of 20x0, preceding 20x1. Okay? While for the statement of profit or loss, statement of changes in equity, and statement of cash flows, if we present for the semi-annual interim period ending June 30, 20x1, the comparative statement shall present also the information on the June 30 of the preceding year. June 30, 20x0. Ayan. The same goes with sa statement of changes in equity and statement of changes in cash flows. Okay. Next, what if uh, the interim period is quarterly? No? Every 3 months. Ayan. Let's say in the third quarter. So when you say third quarter, that would be on July, August, September, no? So, if for the statement of financial position, yung current presentation mo is as of September 30, 20x1. The same pa rin yung comparative statement presentation mo is the end of the period, okay? The statement of financial position as of the end of the preceding year. So that would still be on the comparative statement is on December 31, 20x0. Okay? Now, for the statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income, uh, for example, for the 9-month ending, so from January to September, kasi third quarter, pwede tayo for the month ending or for the 3 months ending. So when you say for the 9-month ending, that's from January 1 to September 30. Okay? For the 3 months ending naman, the third quarter, so that would be from July 1 to September 30. Okay? So the comparative statement would be, the current would be on September 30, 20x1 for the 9-month ending September 30, 20x1. The comparative is also for the 9-month ending September 30, 20x0, the preceding year. Pero kung 3 months ending lang yan, so the current is September 30, 20x1, okay? And the comparative is also for the 3-month ending September 30, 20x0. Okay? And the same goes with statement of changes in equity and statement of changes in cash flows. Okay, that's how you present the current and comparative statements in an interim financial reporting. Next, we have here basic principles. So under PAS 34, paragraph 28, an entity shall apply the same accounting policies in its interim financial statements as are applied in its annual financial statement. So kung ano yung accounting policy mo in an annual financial statement, yun din dapat yung mag-apply in the interim financial statement. For example, your depreciation, the accounting policy in your depreciation is dapat magamit ng sige. So, inventory na lang para mas masabta, no? Kasi accounting policy. So, yung accounting policy mo sa inventory is to measure inventory at lower of cost or net realizable value or LCNRV. Okay? Ayan. Or let's say, instead of weighted average, yung gamitin dapat, yung accounting policy mo in costing your inventory is the FIFO, first in, first out. So kung yung accounting policy mo annual for the inventory is first in first out, dapat yun din yung gamitin mo in your interim financial reports. First in first out din. Now, revenues from products sold or services rendered are generally recognized for interim reports on the same basis as for the annual period. Okay? Now, cost and expenses are recognized as incurred in an interim period. Of course. Okay? Accrual basis pa din. Now, expenses associated directly with revenue are matched against revenue in those interim periods in which the related revenue is recognized. For example, meron kang sales in the second quarter, dapat yung direct expenses, the related direct expenses ng sales mo for the second quarter, dapat i-recognize mo din yon in the second quarter. Ano man yung mga direct expenses ng sales? Cost of sales. Di ba? So, dapat yung cost of sales related to sales in the second quarter shall also be recognized in relation to the sales in the second quarter. While expenses not uh, associated directly with revenue are recognized in interim period as incurred or allocated over the interim periods benefited. Now, if expenses benefited the entire year, so dapat i-allocate mo din siya over the interim periods na naka-benefit sa mga expenses na na-incur. Okay? Ayan. Now, under PAS 34, paragraph 21, if the business is seasonal, so the entity is aside from the interim report, so dapat encourage din si entity to disclose financial information for the latest 12 months and comparative information for the prior 12 months period in addition to the interim period financial statements. While the preparation of interim financial reports usually will require a greater use of estimation than annual financial reports. So ito na yung sabi natin kanina, no? Nasa interim financial reporting, since informations are not yet available or at least the complete information needed is not yet available, so you will rely, no, the preparers of the interim financial statements will rely greatly on estimates. Okay? So rather than the annual financial statement. So mas grabe yung estimation natin or reliance natin on estimation kapag mag-prepare tayo ng interim financial report kaysa sa nag-prepare tayo ng annual financial report. Kasi usually sa annual financial report, kompleto na yung mga information needed, okay, for the year ending. Ayan. So if an entity's business is highly seasonal, ayan, ano na yan? Tapos na pala yan. Ayan, ulit lang. Now, gains and losses arising in an interim period are recognized immediately and are not deferred. Example, loss on inventory write-down and reversals, assets impairment losses and reversals, discontinued operations and fair value changes on assets measured at fair value. Lahat ng yan, hindi dapat yan ina-allocate. It shall immediately be recorded in the year or recognized in the interim period in which these gains and losses occurred. Okay? While cost and expenses, no, or income that benefits the entire year, so if cost and expenses benefits the entire year, uh, or are earned or incurred and earned over the year, are spread out over the interim periods. So example sa mga cost or expenses and income that benefits the entire year would be depreciation, amortization, property taxes, insurance, interest expense on or income, 13th month pay and other year-end bonuses, diba? So itong mga expenses and income na to and costs, they benefit the entire year. So dapat i-allocate natin siya over the interim periods, no? For which the said interim periods benefited this cost or expenses or income. Okay? Now, for inventories, inventory shall be measured at LCNRV, even for interim purposes. If not realizable value is if the realizable or if net realizable value is lower than cost, then a loss on inventory write-down shall be recognized regardless of whether the write-down is temporary or permanent. So the write-down will be recognized in the interim period kung kailan nangyari yung write-down. Regardless kung temporary man yan or permanent write-down. Ayan. So, next. Uneven costs. Costs that are incurred unevenly during an entity's financial year shall be anticipated or deferred for interim purposes only if it is also appropriate to anticipate or defer the type of cost at the end of the financial year. So kung at the end of the financial year, it is appropriate to defer this uneven cost. When you say uneven cost, ito yung mga cost na na-incur not throughout the year, no? For a certain period during the year lang. Okay? So if it is, if it is appropriate to, defer this one at the end of the year, then you can also defer or allocate this one or anticipate this one for interim purposes or interim reporting purposes. So a reliable estimate of the, we also have your year-end bonuses. So a bonus is anticipated for interim purposes if and only if the bonus is a legal obligation. So if it is an obligation, legal obligation daw or past practice, constructive obligation, di ba? To which the entity has no realistic alternative but to make the payment. In such a case, year-end bonuses shall be anticipated. So a reliable estimate of the obligation, the reliable estimate of the obligation can also be met or made. Okay? Ayan. So ina-anticipate ang mga year-end bonuses, no? For interim purposes if again there is legal or constructive obligation and it can be estimated reliably. Now, irregular costs. So these are costs that are generally discretionary and even though they are planned shall not be anticipated as of an interim date simply because the costs have not yet been incurred. Okay? Ayan. And depreciation and amortization. So depreciation and amortization for an interim period shall be based only on assets owned during the interim period. So meaning if meron kang asset, depreciable asset na binili on June lang, so the depreciation shall only be allocated from June to December. So kapag nag-quarterly ka, so yung depreciation shall only be recognized for the third quarter, for I don't know, if you bought an equipment for on July, okay, and then you're reporting on a quarterly period, so yung depreciation doon would only be for will only be reported for the third quarter, July to September, and fourth quarter, October to December. So, the interim periods na wala pa naman tayong owned or si entity na owned na mga depreciable asset shall not be allocated with depreciation or amortization. So, in our example, the first quarter, January to March, and second quarter, April to June, shall not be allocated with depreciation expense. Okay? Ayan. So we have here mga paid vacation and holiday leave. So paid vacation and holiday leave shall be accrued for interim purposes because these are enforceable as o legal commitment man yan or legal obligation man yung paid vacation and holiday leave. So at the end of the interim period, they shall be recognized or accrued. Okay? Income tax naman, interim period income tax expense shall reflect the same general principle of income tax accounting applicable to annual reporting. So meaning, yung income tax natin can also be what? Accrued no, at the end of the interim period. The same principle that applies in an annual reporting basis. Okay. So we also have here gains and losses. No, gains or losses from disposal or property. Okay, gains or losses from discontinued operation and other gains or losses shall not be allocated over the interim period. So they shall not be allocated over the interim period. They shall be reported in the interim period in which they are realized, and the losses are reported in the interim period in which they are incurred. So kung sa third quarter lang tayo nagbenta ng asset, let's say ng property, plant, and equipment, and we recognize gain as a result of the disposal of PPE, or the gain shall only be recognized in the third quarter. Okay? Or if nag-discontinue tayo ng operation in the second quarter for a certain segment, or the loss on discontinued operation or from discontinued operation, or gains and losses from the discontinued operation shall only be recognized or incurred in the second quarter, the period wherein there is a discontinuance of operation. Okay? And when it comes to discretionary income, no, shall be recognized immediately in the period the income is earned. Example is yung mga dividend income. So hindi mo pwede hindi mo pwede i-allocate yung dividend income. Okay? Kasi technically, it does not, benefit the entire year naman, di ba? So, kung dineclare yan in the fourth quarter, so sa fourth quarter na interim report po lang din yan dapat i-recognize or i-present. Okay? Yan. Diretso tayo sa sample problem. So, we only have, four basic sample problems, okay, for this review. Yan. So, we have here the income statement of Mama Ajit Company for the year ended December 31, 2010. Okay? So, meron siyang sales, cost of goods sold, gains in sale of equipment, operating expenses, casualty loss, income tax. Yeah. Okay, so accordingly, the tax rate is 30%. For the third quarter, sales were 30% of total sales. So, in the entire year, the third quarter, the sale on the third quarter is 30% of the sale annually for the entire year. So, remember, ito, 1 year to na mga information. For interim reporting purposes, a gross profit rate of 40% can be justified. So, meaning, kung 100% yung sales, 60% yung gross profit, yung cost of sales kasi 40% man daw yung justifiable. 'Di ba? Estimate lang to class, 'di ba? Kasi justified so meaning there is a great deal of estimate here. Okay? Yan. And then variable operating expenses are allocated in the same proportion as sales. Fixed operating expenses are allocated based on the expiration of time. Ayan. So, ina-allocate natin yung fixed operating expenses based on the expiration of time. Ayan. So, kung meron tayong fixed expenses dyan, i-divide natin yan over the years benefited. And then, of the total operating expenses, 400,000 relates to variable expenses. And again, sabi niya na yung variable operating expenses are allocated in the same proportion as sales. So, kung ilang percent yung sales, yun din yung percent ng variable expenses to be recognized or to be incurred in the in a certain interim period. The equipment was sold on June 1, okay? So merong gain kasi gain on sale of equipment. And the casualty loss occurred on September 1, 2010. Question, what is the income before tax for the third quarter ended September 30, 2010? So what is the income before tax? Sige. Of course, we'll start with sales. So, kung yung annual sales is 6 million, as presented here, 30% man daw yung sales pertaining to the third quarter. Okay, and then September 30. So, multiply mo lang yan by 30%. So, that's 1.8. Di ba sabi niya that for interim reporting purposes, a gross profit rate of 40% can be justified. So, meaning the cost of goods sold is 60% of the sales. Okay, para yung gross income is 40% of sales. Okay? So that would be 720, okay, divided by 1,008 okay, 720 divide 1,800. So that's 40%. 40% yung gross income over sales. So kung 40% to, meaning 60% siya. Now, for our variable expenses, di ba sabi niya that variable operating expenses are allocated in the same proportion of sales. So kung yung sales mo ay yung variable expenses mo is 400,000 and it will be allocated in the interim periods based on the proportion of sales. So kung 30% si sales, 30% din yung kung 30% yung sales natin for the third quarter, 30% din yung variable expenses for the third quarter. Okay? Yan. So, 400,000 times 30%. So, that's 120,000. Okay. So, sa operating expenses natin, 400 is variable expenses. So, 100,000 is the fixed expenses. Okay? And and the fixed expenses, according here, it shall be allocated based on the expiration of time. Meaning, yung fixed expenses natin na 100,000 shall be allocated over 4 quarters. For the first quarter, second, third, and fourth. So every quarter gets a quarter. Okay, gets a quarter of 100,000 which is 25,000 yung ina-allocate in The third quarter ended September 30. Again, casualty losses shall be recognized entirely, no, in the date, in the quarter kung kailan sila nangyari. Okay? Or since the casualty loss here, the casualty loss occurred on the third quarter. So sa third quarter lang, the entire amount shall also be recognized in the third quarter. Okay? So hindi na siya ina-allocate. Now, how about the gain? O ito, gain on sale of equipment. So since nangyari yung sale on June 1, o sa second quarter dapat natin present, no, na interim report si gain na 100,000. Not in September. Okay? Yeah. So ito lang yung ating information, very condensed information for uh, interim reporting. So the income before tax is from here to here. That would be 275,000. Okay? Sample problem number 2. Thack, Thack, Thack company had the following transactions during the quarter ended March 31, 2010. So meron siyang loss from typhoon, no? Casualty loss. Ayan. Payment of fire insurance premium for calendar year. So sabi natin kanina, 'di ba, sa concept review, insurance premium benefits the entire year. Okay? So, for interim reporting purposes, ito kailangan i-allocate for the three for interim periods. So the question is, what amount should be included in the income statement for the quarter ended March 31? So meaning, itong loss from typhoon, it occurred in the first quarter month. So part siya sa March 31 na interim report. Okay, recognize yan siya in March, in the first quarter. The entire amount not allocated. While the insurance premium, since it benefited the entire year, so it will be what? Allocated over 4 quarters during the year. Okay, so first quarter being 25,000. Okay? So that would be 725. Ayan, nawala yung total. Okay. Next. Ayan. Sample problem number 3. So we have here Dash Meal company incurred an inventory loss from a market decline of 840,000 on June 30, 2010. What amount of inventory loss should be recognized in Dash Meal's quarterly income statement for the 3 months ended June 30, 2010? Okay? So, now, the inventory loss of 840,000 shall be recognized entirely. Ayan, okay. The inventory loss of 840,000, regardless kung yung loss na yan due to write down is temporary or not, o the entire amount, di ba, wherein inventory gains or losses na on inventory write downs or impairment losses, the entire amount shall be recognized in the interim period na nag-occur, no, yung write down na yan. So the inventory loss na 840,000 shall be recognized for the 3 months 3 months ended June 30, 2010. Okay? 840. Again, regardless kung temporary ba yung write down or permanent. Okay. And we have here last problem. Okay, this should be problem 4. Bakit problem 3 yan? So this should be problem 4. So Damiel company has historically reported bad debts expenses of 5% of sales in each quarter. So yung budgeting, yung computation niya pala dito ng allowance for uh, the net realizable value of accounts receivable is by the use of percent of sales, no? So income statement method. So 5% of sales in each quarter for the current year. So the entity follow the same procedures in the 3 quarters of the year. So the same yung procedures yung ginawa niya sa first, second, and third quarter. Now, however, in the fourth quarter, the entity in consultation with its auditor determined that the bad debts expense for the entire year should be 450,000 pala dapat for the entire year. So sales in each quarter of the year were as follows. So the first quarter sale, the second, the third, and the fourth quarter. How much budget expense should be recognized for the fourth quarter? Ganito lang yan. Kung yung recognize mo for the entire year is 450,000, okay? Tanggalin mo lang dyan yung mga budget expense na na-recognize mo in the first, second, and third quarter. The balance is the budget expense to be recognized in the fourth quarter. Okay? So, kung yung budget expense mo is based on 5% of quarter sales, okay? So, the first quarter, the sale is 2 million. So, the budgets in the first quarter is 5% of 2 million, which is 100,000. The second quarter, that's 1.5 million. So, multiplied by 5%, that would be 75,000. And for the fourth quarter, for the third quarter, the sales is 2.5 million multiplied by 5%. So the budget expense for the third quarter is 125,000. Okay? So since yung annual budget expense according to our auditor is 450, so tanggalin mo lang to. So the budget expense to be recognized in the fourth quarter should be at 150,000. Okay, so that is our concept review on interim financial reporting.